a very common question in the minds of all trainees or all young doctors, young carers, pastoral care, social work, taking care of patients who are dying or might die, is the question, what's happening to us? What's happening to the patient, to the spouse, to the kid, to the other professionals when they encounter such a thing as death and dying? For most of us, death, dying, dead, those are the kind of things we don't usually think about. We kind of live our lives, try to be happy. Right now, in modern times, I mean, happy is the goal, unfortunately. So it's a death-denying culture, it's a death-denying society. So we've been living our lives, enjoying our lives, and we don't usually think about death and dying because that's just a bummer. I mean, such a negative thing. And how can you be happy if you think about death, dying, and you'll be snuffed out of this world? And so every time a trainee, especially the young doctors, the first time they encounter death and dying, or the first few times, some of the young learners would begin to ask themselves, how does the patient feel? How does the wife feel? How does the child feel, or the daughter or the son, once they realize that the father or the mother has something that would kill them? Father is terminal. How do the doctors feel? How do the nurses and the other care providers around the patient during this illness experience feel when they realize that there's nothing they can do to preserve the patient's life? I mean, that this is it. The patient's going to die. What am I feeling right now? I mean, is this a universal sensation? What's the common sensation? Especially for young doctors. I mean, you enter medicine, and most of us, when we enter med school, I mean, nobody thinks about death, dying, and stuff like that. I guess in the old days when medicine cannot do a lot of stuff, and doctors are not living like a very nice, luxurious life funded with money coming from, well, we won't go into that. And doctors are living a simple life, and things are more compassionate and more altruistic, and you're doing it because you want to take care of people, and there's a lot of death and dying. And I guess if we were living during those times, our reaction to death, dying, dead would be different compared to our reactions right now. There's a very interesting story, a parable written by Richard Kalish. I added a little bit more detail just to emphasize certain things. And this talks about the person. It doesn't say who he is, but it could be a carer, it could be a physician, or it could be a pastoral care provider or a nurse. But he's definitely a student because he says he needs it for his studies or his additional training. He's someone in training, and he wants to know about death. That he wants to know how it feels like for a man or a person to be told that he's dying or he'll be dead. How that person feels, how the wife feels, how the family feels, how the carer feels, probably. He wants to know about death and people's reaction to death. And so he went to this mountain, and the mountain was called M Medina, and there's some mystery to it. He went to the mountain, he climbed up, he's very tired, he's hungry, and he wanted to rest, but he really wanted to know. So this very urgent need, it's not just a simple, I want to know, I'm curious. No, it's like very important. It's important to my work. Probably he's going to deal with death, dying, and suffering. And in his mind, and he wants to do a good job. I mean, he's not in it for the money. Unlike some of us who enter fields of care and other professions related to medical care, he's really serious. It's like he cannot absorb, or he cannot go through his training or finish his training well or become a good graduate without knowing what death is. Maybe he wants to excel. I mean, he just doesn't want to be someone who's like run-of-the-mill graduate who's doing this and earning stuff, and he wants to really know, he wants to grasp the essence of his field, profession, caring. And it has something to do with caring for people who are dying, maybe people who are sick, or maybe just people who are dying. I mean, you don't need to be very sick to die, but something he wants to know. It's very important for his training, he says. He made his way up and was looking for this sage, a wise old person. Apparently this person is very well known, so he asked around and he learned about this person. He went up there and was very tired, and he was searching for this wise person, and he found him. I need this for my training, and I need to understand things about death. I need to understand how it feels like to know that you're dying, how it feels like for the person who's dying, for his wife, for his family, for the people who are trying to keep him alive, people who are trying to care for him. That's probably who he is. So he's concerned. He's concerned about that. There's silence, and nobody was talking for a few minutes. And suddenly, the wise old sage said, "It is the horse in the dining room. Of course, he was surprised with the answer. He probably was expecting a discussion about death and dying, or at the very least, I mean, this is a sage, a wise old sage, probably give him sentences. Hard to understand, but it's still something much more than it is the horse in the dining table. I mean, that caught him off guard. There was silence. I mean, that's all the sage or the wise person said. And he was so tired, and he dozed off. I mean, he probably wasn't trying to sleep, but trying to sleep, because it took a lot of effort to get up there and finally get to meet the person. And he's not even sure if that person has a lot of time to spend with him. But he's so tired, so he fell asleep. And by the time he woke up, the wise old sage was gone. Yeah, that's a waste of effort, of course. And he can't find him anymore. So I mean, what else can you do? So he went down the mountain, and he went through the long journey back, went about doing his work and his training. He wasn't training. That's the reason why he wanted to know more about death. It's not the kind of thing that usually would trouble you if you were in some course or training program or some line of work that doesn't involve death and dying. Most of the time, especially nowadays, we don't want to think about that. We want to be successful and be happy, and thinking about death and feeling bad about it and feeling like we won't last long in this world is certainly not the kind of thing that would motivate anyone, as far as we know, or motivate most of us. He went through training, and I don't know whether the horse in the dining room helped him. Probably didn't, because he didn't understand him. Many years later, so he graduated, is already working, but he got invited. So this is the dining room part. So he got invited by a friend of a friend, not a close friend, but a friend of a friend, for dinner. For most of us, or many of us, dinner is like meeting with friends. You go there, we pretty much know what happens during dinner. So you greet each other and you smile, and then you talk about interesting things, and enjoy the food, and you compliment the host, and you thank the host, and you say goodbye to each other, and you have a nice, happy time, right? That's supposed to be what it is. Unfortunately, this particular dinner was not like that. So he was invited with other guests. There's 8 or 10 of them. He cannot recall exactly. And it's hard to recall, and you'll understand why. He found himself in the living room, and they're greeting each other. They're trying to smile. I mean, some of them, these guests are strangers, but you know what you do during those times. You talk about things that's familiar to all of you. Probably talk about politics or a basketball game or the weather, things like that, or some nice benign topic for the day, something that's not too unhappy, and something that would make the discussion lively, make people interested, but not feeling angry or irritated or sad. You avoid those kinds of topics. And so they were drinking wine, and suddenly the wife of the host went in and announced, dinner is ready. Dinner is served. Let's go to our dining room. The spouse and the host were outside trying to say hi to everyone, while everyone's trying to make their way to their dining room. Our lead character went in, and the guy went up the mountain, went in, expecting a good day. He doesn't know about the food, but it can't be that bad. And even if it's bad, it's with his friends, and it will still be a good dinner. I mean, because everybody tries their best to come up with a happy, good dinner. I mean, that's what we usually do. But when he entered the room, he was astonished. He was shocked. He was surprised. There's this brown horse on the dining table. And of course, if you enter the room expecting a fun dinner, and then suddenly you see this brown horse on the dining table, how would you react? You were shocked, like, what? I mean, it's not what you expected, right? And what do you do? Well, what would you do? Probably just, you smile, or you don't say anything. Actually, you might be too shocked to say anything, and it's usually actually probably the reaction. You don't know what to say. I mean, it's not something you expect. Like your world, your expectations is you go there, you have fun, you talk to each other, you have dinner, and that's what you expect. And suddenly there's this brown horse in the dining room. It's actually on the dining table, so you can't say anything. I mean, your brain just doesn't produce anything. What he did was he observed everyone else coming in and tried to see what will they do when they see the horse on the dining table. Maybe someone will mention it, and then they'll go on from there. I mean, at least he's not going to be the one who'll say it first. Or maybe someone will explain what it is, because he certainly doesn't know why the horse is there. So he waited for people to come in. But the reaction of everyone, he noticed, is exactly the same as his reaction. If they see it, and he can sense the surprise, the astonishment, and the shock, and the gasp, the silent gasp. But they keep quiet. Nobody says anything about it. They try to smile, because obviously it's so noticeable that it's not an honest smile. I mean, how can you smile when you're in shock? Like, what's that brown horse doing on the dining table? When the hosts arrived, they too, surprisingly, were shocked. So this is something new. They didn't know about the horse, and the horse was already there. It was an uninvited guest. But the hosts, and the spouse, and the family of the host reacted the same way. They saw it. And he actually see them. He was observing everyone. He doesn't know what to do. So he's hypervigilant. He was trying to see what's happening, and he can sense that it's the same thing. They were shocked. They gasped. They were surprised. They're looking at the horse, and then they glanced at everyone else just like he did, especially the host. I mean, they're probably concerned how the guests would react. They were glancing at the horse and the guests, and the horse and the guests, and it looked like everything's fine because the guests are smiling, sort of. Of course, they look uncomfortable, but they're making an attempt to smile, and nobody's talking about the brown horse. And what they actually did was interesting, because they too did the same thing. They obviously saw the horse. Obviously, everyone saw the horse, but they tried to smile, they tried to be nice, they tried to do exactly what they would have done if the horse wasn't on the table, wasn't inside the room. And they are still good hosts. They're smiling, they're talking to their guests. They invited everyone to get their food from the buffet table or the food table, and the food tasted good. But the guests, and including the one telling the story, obviously, I mean, even if you were the one sitting there, even if you were the guest, you won't even know how the food tastes like, because while you're eating, there's this huge horse on the table, and he can smell the horse, and he can't recall. When he was telling the story, he actually can't recall much about the food. All he can recall is this huge horse on the table, and that's usually what the huge problem is. It's a crisis or something that just shocks you. It's not supposed to be there. He says he cannot recall much about the food, and that he can certainly recall what was happening in the room, and it's all about the horse. He was trying his best to avoid the horse, so his plate was near the edge of the table, right? Because the horse is right on the table, so he was like, so that he can eat without looking or seeing any part of the horse, maybe, or the horse is occupying much, and he's trying to avoid the horse. And the other guests are doing all sorts of things. Some of them are doing the same thing as he is. If they're close to the horse, they're trying to pull their plate as far away from the horse as possible, and the others are trying to stay as far away from the horse as possible. So, and he can also recall everyone trying to do the stuff they expected. They're trying to revive the smiles, the fun, the happiness. They try to come up with nice things to talk about. Something benign or innocuous or interesting, but of course you can sense that everyone was really having a hard time. I mean, how can you come up with a different topic when there's one huge, big horse right on the table while you're eating your food? And a lot of times the topic just stops. I mean, it's hard to think and hold the conversation in that kind of situation. Every time there was silence, 2 or 3 people would make an earnest attempt to revive the conversation, because we should do that. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be happy enjoying this night. I mean, that's what life is all about. That's what we expected. That's what we're supposed to do. And if we're guests, we should do that. Even the hosts are making an earnest attempt to get everyone talking about all sorts of things except the one horse on the dining table. And so they had coffee and things. He was actually describing how he's reacting. Of course, he cannot say how the other people were reacting, but there are certain things that crossed his mind. One is, maybe nobody seems to be saying it. Maybe I should say it, like, hey, there's a horse on the dining table. Don't you see that? Maybe we should talk about that. He didn't do that. I mean, why would you do that? He hardly knows all the guests, and it's not that close to the host and the spouse and the family. I mean, that can embarrass them. Obviously, he noticed they were also shocked, but why did they allow a horse to get into their dining room? Of course, you won't do that. That's the reason why you didn't say anything about it, because you don't want to embarrass the host. You don't want them to feel bad. They obviously tried their best to prepare for this dinner for their guests, to make things good and happy in the living room, and they're clearly trying their best in the dining room. So that would be cruel. Why would you do that? And that would also be cruel to the guests. So obviously they're trying their best to help out the host, or trying their best to help out the other guests, and they're trying to keep going, to give them the night they expected, fun and no big horses, and talk about the food, enjoy the night, and things like that. So why would you bring up the horse on the table? He thought of telling the host's house, it's okay, I don't mind, because they were clearly flustered, and they were troubled, and just to make them feel better, it's okay, I don't mind. Maybe he can just approach them and quietly say, it's okay, I don't mind, I'm enjoying the night. But then that's obviously a lie. He does mind. That's the only thing he can see, and that's the only thing he can think of. He can barely follow the conversations or the discussion. And yes, that's the same thing with the other guests. But when they're about to leave, he thought of saying, I really enjoyed the dinner in the company. And he actually tried to say that. But in his mind, it didn't come out too well. And it didn't seem honest, because everybody knew it wasn't such an enjoyable dinner. And the discussion wasn't that enjoyable, because everybody was looking at the horse. Everybody was trying not to look at the horse, but everybody's thinking of the horse. He wanted to say, I know how it feels. It must be tough for you. But then he decided not to, because obviously he doesn't know how it feels like. I mean, he hasn't had a horse on his dining table while he's entertaining guests. I mean, obviously he doesn't know how it feels like. It's not the kind of thing he's even thought about. So he decided not to say, I know how it feels. Right? He actually even thought of saying, how do you feel about having a horse in your dining table? But that's the other thing you try to avoid, especially nowadays. I mean, you avoid talk about emotions, especially if these are not happy emotions. I mean, you're a guest. They invited you for dinner. Now you're going to ask them how they feel. To do is, you don't want to go into emotions. You'll sound like a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And even if you are a mental health person, or even if you are a counselor or a care provider, it doesn't seem right to say such things. Why? Because, again, it's embarrassing to embarrass the host. You'll feel bad. They'll feel bad. It's dinner, and it feels better if the horse wasn't there. So actually what everyone did is they attempted to create a world, have a dinner during that time in that place, create a world while they're having dinner without the horse. And of course, that's not real. That's not going to happen, because you can't create a world without the horse when the horse is right there in front of you. So it didn't work out. It was a bad dinner. Nobody really enjoyed, although they said they did, and they thanked the host. Later on, he asked around, and he learned that the host and the hostess saw the horse. And obviously, they saw the horse, but they were afraid that it would cause a lot of discomfort for the guests, and they really wanted it to be a successful night. And the idea was to keep the guests happy and entertained, because that's what you do, right? You don't do stuff to make people unhappy. You don't talk about stuff that would cause a lot of discomfort. And obviously, the big horse on the table caused a lot of discomfort. And so the other thing is, it's supposed to be fun and happy, and definitely if people start talking about the horse and offering them sympathy or condolences, I'm sorry, we know you prepared for dinner, but it's obviously a flop. We know you tried, that's okay. You don't want to hear that if you're the host, especially if it's the first time you've seen the horse. You'd rather that they don't talk about the horse. And you don't want people to say, we understand. Obviously, it's not the kind of thing they would understand. They don't understand it themselves. And then after dinner, everyone went home, and and he cannot say much about what happened to the host and his family. But our narrator says, that's the last time he went there, and he doesn't want to see that house again. He doesn't want to see that host and his family again. That's the worst experience of his life. That's the worst dinner of his life. It's that bad. And you can see why. Dinner, you're expecting something, and suddenly there's a horse on the table, and you have to suffer through it. And something you can't forget, and something that's so uncomfortable. You don't want it happening to you again, right? You're probably praying that hopefully for the rest of my life, when I invite people for dinner, there wouldn't be a horse in the dining room, or there wouldn't be a horse on the dining table. And so the ending goes, now he didn't search for the wise old man, but he found himself visiting that place again. So I don't know why, maybe as a tourist or for a conference or part of his work, but he was there, and he encountered the old sage. He's very frail and weak looking, but still alive. So he saw the wise old person. And he excitedly approached him, and he still remembered him. And who would forget that kind of experience? He climbed up the mountains very tired, very, very troubled, searching for him. And right now, obviously, he's not troubled anymore. It seems like, he's learned to work or deal with death, dying, without knowing anything about it, or he's working in whatever profession he is without thinking much about death, dying, and stuff. He got over it, or probably tried to copy everyone else and how they did their work, or how they lived their lives, ended up doing what everybody else is doing, or thinking, or behaving, or acting, or reacting how everyone else reacts when they see dead, dying, and stuff. He approached the wise old man, so something in him probably told him, there's something wrong with the way I'm thinking about death. Something in him was still troubled. Maybe he's not satisfied with the way he responds to death. Maybe he's not satisfied with the way he understands death. Probably just stopped thinking about it. And he obviously finished his training and graduated, which is strange. If a trainee feels that it's so important that it's hard to understand what's going to be after his training, it's strange for a young trainee to feel so troubled that he really needs to understand death and how people react to death, for him to become the ideal version of what he's going to be. Graduates, just like everyone else, without clearly knowing what death, dying is supposed to be. A strange kind of training. You're being prepared for something that has something to do, or is very much involved with death and dying, but you can actually finish the course or graduate or become that kind of worker or professional, or that graduate person, without knowing much about death and dying and how people react to it. Okay, and he approached the white old sage and he asked the same question. He said, I want to know things about death still. Let's talk about death and how people feel like when they know they're about to die or they're dying, and how their family or loved ones feel like. And again, the answer is the same. He didn't. You would expect after all these years, and the sage, here I am. This is like destiny. You should tell me something more, right? But the wise old man said the same thing. It's the horse on the dining table. But then he added, it's the kind of guest who visits everyone's house unexpectedly. It visits everyone. We just don't know when. And when it visits, it just stays there, and you don't know what it is, and you try to live out your life not thinking about it, but it's there. Even if you find it very uncomfortable, it's just very shocking. It's not the kind of thing you really want. You have to deal with it. It's there. It's not moving. If you're the host or the guest, once you see it, you want to say something about it, but you don't. You cannot. And then the wise old sage says, but if you mention it and speak about the horse, or speak of the horse, then everybody else in the room can speak about it. They wanted to say something about it. They wanted to mention it. But they won't. But if someone speaks about it, if you would mention it, then people will be able to start talking about it. The horse would remain on the dining table. It's not going to disappear when you mention it, but you'll be less distressed and you'll be less uncomfortable because you're not trying your best not to see it. You're not exerting so much effort to create a world where it's not there. It's out in the open. So you'll be less uncomfortable if you speak about it. The horse would lose its power. You cannot magically make this horse disappear, but you can speak of the horse and you can render the horse less powerful, and you'll be able to enjoy the company of the other guests and the host better. I mean, it's not going to be a perfect night, but it's going to be much, much better. There's a twist to the ending. The old man is very weak. He says, now let me invite you for dinner. So it starts out with the trip and then a dinner, and then it ends with a dinner. So that's the story. Let me invite you for dinner. And then they walked towards his house, and then he entered the dining area, and then he saw a horse on the dining table of this wise old person. And then the wise old person looked at him and he says, yes, there is a horse in this room. There is a horse on my dining table. But that's okay. There's no reason for the horse to ruin the entire night. We can enjoy dinner with the horse. There's no reason why it should ruin the night. We'll have dinner with the horse. It shouldn't disturb us too much. We can even talk about it. And so they talk for a very long time. They enjoy the dinner while the horse sits on the table watching over them. Sometimes they talked about the horse, but it wasn't the topic all throughout the night, and they enjoyed each other's company, dinner, and their conversation. The end.